Okay, we had to do a little research, took a break. Okay, so Jen Baker, she's the editor of Electric Lit, and there's an article in this month's issue, and it's called Writing About Mental Illness from the Inside. Writing About Mental Illness from the Inside. And it's a discussion, a conversation. Now, Jen Baker also has a wonderful podcast called Minorities in Publishing.
Okay.
And I think this is her fifth anniversary of this podcast. So shout out to that. And this is an excerpt from the interview she had with Basie Ikpi's. If I'm saying it incorrectly, it's IKPI conversation. But it's so powerful and so on point to this discussion about memoir because Miss Basie wrote, I'm lying, but I'm telling the truth. Okay, that's her memoir essays, nonfiction essays that she's just released. And in it, she has some powerful quotes. And I'm going to give you some of the quotes. Yeah. You thinking about Nova Bordelon with that on top. And then some of what we're going to discover with even Jerry B. Jenkins, we're going to have this discussion. So one of the quotes is, the language and rhythm. This is what Jen Baker is writing, which I totally, as soon as I read it, I said, I got to read this article because this is just where we are in this conversation. The language and rhythm of Ikpi's work intensifies the reading experience. And this is the most important part, and reveals a way to discuss memory. That is not always reliable. Memory, that's not always reliable. So when you think about memoir, you think about telling your story or telling other people's experiences from the story. What do you think about memory and how memory plays into that?
Well, so little side note, I'm heavily into like communications, but in order to be in communications, you also have to take a couple psych courses to just really understand how people think and how they receive communication and vice versa, yes, as far as how they output communication. And actually, your memories kind of play a little trick on you. So if you think that something is bad, you'll think that it's way worse than what it is.
Yes.
And if you think that something is great, you'll think that it is awesome compared to what it is. A lot of people fantasize about college, and there's a lot of alumni associations that play on that. So you may look back and be like, college was the greatest time. You know, we had parties and everything, but you forget about all the parking tickets,
struggle,
all the crappy food,
yes,
and just
the hard bumps,
yes,
the nasty bathrooms,
and like how terrible the living was altogether. Yes. So your mind really does do a trip because you're so far removed.
Yes, nostalgia.
Then, yeah.
Memory loves nostalgia.
Yep.
And it might have been a horrific experience, but it softens the blows of those experiences the older you get. And that is one reason, I'll tell you this as a Christian mom, that's one of the reasons why I love this quote about if you train up a child in the way they should go, they won't depart. And so a lot of us bank on, you take them to church, you give them praise and worship, you give them those spiritual songs, they won't depart. And yeah, they might totally act a fool in Sweetie Pie's age generation. But by the time they hit where they're a parent, they're settling down, all of that kind of comes back because memory says these were the best of the days. Yes. These were the best of times.
And you get people that are like, well, this is how I grew up.
This is how I grew up.
And look at how I turned out, and we did this, and I remember doing this. But really, you might have hated going to summer camp.
Yes, you might have hated staying at church 10 hours. Yeah. Though, yes, very much so. So memory plays a part in memoir. And that is the feminine, denotation or defined term of memoir is memory. There's some memory in that in Greek terms. I just like that. So that plays a really important part. But in this interview, it's so powerful because it talks a lot about how she used memory to be as honest to her lack of understanding the full scope of the experiences.
Right.
I don't believe Nova Bordelon did that.
She filled in some lines. There was a lot of things that she pulled
embellished
from other places.
Yes.
So yeah.
And I do think that that's Memoir is trying to create a story out of your experience, because your life in and of itself doesn't read like a fictional novel, you know. And part of the joy of people who read memoirs is that it does read like a story. One of my all-time favorite memoirs is Extraordinary Ordinary People by Secretary of State, Black Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, by Condoleezza Rice. Extremely well written, and it reads like a narrative. It does not read like you're reading about her parents or grandparents' lives. But Memory, I think she was very true to what Memory does. And part of that truth came because she struggled with bipolar disorder. So she struggled with bipolar disorder. So she recognized that when you have bipolar disorder, you lose time, space, place, you lose memory. And because of that, she did not want to pretend as though she had all of the pieces.
Right.
And she wanted to honor those who she might be talking about in recognizing that her memory didn't have all
and that truth.
Right. Right. And I think with Nova told a whole lot of folks truths, but I also think she sensationalized a lot of people's truth because it was not her truth.
Okay.
So even though you know what happened to Darla and how they found Darla, you don't know how Darla got there.
Yes.
You weren't in that actual moment. You didn't see the two boys dragging her off to the room. You didn't experience how they laced her stuff.
Right.
You didn't see none of that.
Or you didn't experience her road to rehab. And down to, everything. She really wasn't there when it came to the full story.
Yes.
And the intricacies that went on.
Exactly.
So there was so many things that were still left out. You don't know how these people feel about it today.
Yes. So another piece that goes right into that was Aunt Vi's story. So she told Aunt Vi's story about Jimmy Dean. Had the audacity to go talk to Jimmy Dean without Aunt Vi's permission.
In fact, reached out
to Jimmy Dean without her permission, her knowledge, her approval. Nothing. And it unfolded a whole chaos in her life. And one of the things, so they shut her off, and one of the things that Aunt Vi said is, you don't know the work I did to come out of this. To be at a different place. You don't know the work I did. So you telling her story, you don't know that inside work that she did internally
for
years to get over being a victim of domestic violence, to rewire how she linked up with Jimmy Dean as a soul tie, or how she looked at him as a man.
And just that abuse.
Yes. She said, you don't know the work that I did. But then I felt like this last episode was so powerful because what Vi told her was, I've shown you all of the ways in which I've come out of this. And you didn't share any of that.
Right.
You didn't put any of that in the book. So when a reader reads it, it looks like Aunt Vi's still there.
Right.
In the mess.
And the crazy part about that was the entire time when people, like her family members and stuff like that, were coming to her like, how could you do this? She would be like, well, you're in a great place now. Like, it's cool. But she didn't put anything about these people overcoming this actual stuff and being in these places and the stories of how that actually came to form. At all in the book. That was not mentioned.
Here's another powerful quote from the interview with Miss Basie. But I wanted to be very clear, especially because these are memories that involve other people, that this is my perspective. This is what I'm seeing. This is how it felt from where I am. And I know that because of these other things that went on in my head, in my life, I'm aware that it's not going to be the same conversation. Yep. So she was very careful about that. I don't feel that Nova was careful about that.
So one of the things that I was more so shocked about, because I felt like this just could have stayed, and even our vow was like that, we would have been okay with that going to the grave. Like, it is fine. So in the story, or in the show, there's this one part where she recalls, you know, seeing her father at night out in the field, and basically alludes to the fact that he killed like 2 or 3 men, right? And that's how she remembered it. And it was very, very.
But she didn't see no bodies.
Right.
She didn't see any blood. It was a lot of missing pieces to the memory. But she didn't own those missing pieces, and she put it in the story like it was a complete puzzle.
Yeah. And it was just, it was in there. And they're like, well, why was you don't even know what really happened. This is just something that you saw from a far distance.
And then, okay, so another piece I felt like she didn't need to put in there was about Blue's daddy.
Oh, yeah.
And Ralph Angel. Because to me, that wasn't even history. That's not informing our growth, our process, our experiences, our development as a family. That just happened yesterday.
Yeah. And that was the crazy part about that was, because I feel like this is double-sided, because it's either she wasn't there so she doesn't know the full story, or she was there and she knows exactly how painful that was. She was there when they got the DNA test and Ralph was crying in her arms. So you would think that, you know, she would kind of at least respect that a little bit.
Respect that.
And because you were there, and how about I allowed you to be here for me?
Yes.
So to see all that come around was just hard.
And I will tell you, for somebody who's experiences some trauma, my growth, my development through those processes, people have always said, why don't you write your story and everything? So I'll just give you a small piece. I'm adopted. My adopted mom, that's my mom. I have taken seriously how I would honor her in my story being told. And I had an experience with this because freshman English, I was an English major, freshman English, we had to write an autobiography.
Oh.
Okay. And that was, that was, you know, first time that I'm grown. I'm in college, I'm grown, and I need to tell my story. Right. And so I wrote the autobiography. I wrote it and handed it in, got an A on it, and, you know, wrote, oh, this should be shared. This is a powerful story, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't even go in depth because I think I was doing it in a rush. You know how you are in your first year of school. You're just trying to get the assignments done. And so, but I did feel like it was a great tribute to my mother who adopted me. So I put it in her door because I was living on my own. I put it in her door to read it later. Mm-hmm. And I waited. I waited the first day. I waited the second day. I waited and I waited. I did not want to call her first. I wanted her to call me and be like, oh my God, I read that. It was wonderful. Or whatever. And I think I waited all day. I'm exaggerating a little. I think I waited all day. And the next day, I called her. Mm-hmm. Because I'm like, she had to get it. It was a big paper. So I said, Mom, did you read my paper? And she had been crying all night. And she was still in tears when when she answered the phone. And I was like, what's wrong? You know, I'm thinking, my uncle done died, the dog done died, something going on. And she was like, I didn't know that you experienced any of the stuff. I thought I had shielded you, and I thought I had kept a lot of this from you. So what that taught me was my growth, where I had come from through therapy and all of the supports that she had given me and all the prayers she had laid over me, wasn't her place.
Right.
She hadn't experienced it that way. She was just in the place of get this baby through this, get this baby through this. So maybe the work that I have been getting from all these professionals and support systems, she was not in that place yet. And I felt that way about Nova and all of the people that she had hurt.
Yeah.
That just because you done made it over doesn't mean this story and all of these experiences and all of the people that you're talking about doesn't mean that they have made it over.
Exactly.
And that they are in this same place of full, complete healing, able to share, able to talk about it. And we know that's true for Darla because it sent her in a spiral back into substance abuse. So that's the thing that I struggle with Memoir is that, Nova, first of all, you told a whole bunch of other people business. You went a little windy on them, making it like a tell-all expose. And then you didn't take into consideration with all your super high level of intelligence that their healing process is not your healing process, and where they are in the experience is not where you may be in the experience. And it's easy for you to be in that experience because it wasn't your experience to tell in the first place.
Precisely. And that was with every single story that she told, whether it was with Charlie, Ralph Angel, Darla, her father who is dead.
Yes.
Her aunt,
her mama.
Yes. None of this stuff was hers.
None of it was hers. It didn't know. None of it was hers. And I struggle with all of the accolades, including the National Book Award that she's getting from it, because it almost gives permission.
Yes.
Or maybe if we look a little more complex, it is a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
That you do get a lot of accolades and all of great stuff. But be careful because it can spin out into you losing your family. It can spin out to you losing everything. So I want to give another quote to that. They're not lying. I'm not lying, but it's not the same truth. It's not the same truth. You know, it's not the same truth, you know. So in her memoir, she's saying, I'm not saying that I'm lying. I'm not saying that their story is not lying. And she's writing specifically about experiences that happened to her. And she's still saying, I can own that maybe my perspective is a little skewed because of the mental space that I was in. That it still could be a little skewed, and I want people to recognize that it can still be a little skewed. I felt like this interview speaks to taking care when you write a memoir, when you write anyone else that is living or that has lived in your world, when you tell that story. Now, does that mean that we can't talk about Jimmy Dean and his trifling self?
I would say with all of this stuff, I feel as if she had came to somebody and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Can I interview you to see what your experience was, and can I write upon that, right? Or, as I said, maybe you really are tied to whatever happened, and it's not a memoir. Maybe you should use their actual names and the finite details of their experience. Maybe this should just be a nonfiction.
The girl's a genius. Thinking about what she just said, maybe this ain't the time or the place. And I will tell you, one of the things I thought about when I was trying to put this together for the blog is we grew up with sayings like, family business, stay in the family. You don't talk about our business out to the neighbors and to the church folks and to the down the street. Now, we know that the opposite side of that is a lot of folks swept a whole lot of stuff that should have been exposed, abuses and that kind, and molestations and stuff like that. And we understand that needs to have a voice and needs to definitely support. And if you're somebody in that space, please get the help you need. Tell, run and tell. But when we're talking about just telling someone else's story in this setting, sort of like the Nova Bordelon or the Memoir
for America to know.
For America to know. And even if you're trying to get help or it's for America to know. That's a big part of it. But I know someone who had a very nasty house. extremely nasty house. Like if you went to that house, you was gonna lose 10 pounds because you wouldn't be able to eat at all while you were staying in the house. And then after you left, you probably was gonna need some time to recover, and you wasn't going. So it was a guarantee. People would say, "Oh, you got a party, you got a wedding, go to his house and stay, and you gonna lose 10 pounds." Okay, nasty house. Okay, but this person was somebody who was beloved, and people would go and visit them.
Oh my gosh!
And each person would go visit them and then come back and not tell nobody about the nasty house. So then the next person would go visit
Send you in.
and then come back and not tell nobody. And me and my mother knew this person, and I would say to her, why didn't people say, girl, don't, right, like you at the picnic and they say, don't eat sister such and such food. She got cats all up in her house, you know, whatever. You know, they would warn you. I'm like, why aren't they warning people? And my mother would say, because people have a right to discover what they need to discover on their own and learn and have feelings about it without your input sometimes, which is a little bit like the Nova Bordelon thing, that if there was people who was important enough to those people's lives, they could have had their own experience learning that story. I don't think Nova should have been the one broadcasting the story.
And when it comes down to that, I specifically think about her sister. So Charlie, who's Nova's sister, is like a prominent person in the community. Her ex-husband was an NBA star, so she's very known, and is, you know, trying to do stuff for the community, running for a city council, I believe, or something like that, and basically has a lot going for herself. And there was some nasty details about, you know, some stuff that her ex-husband really did, and that Charlie just tried to clean up. She's like, listen, I didn't do any of this. I was just trying to, you know, salvage my family at the time. That was it. She didn't have to put anything about that in there.
Yes. And I will tell you, on that story in particular, everything that Nova was privy to was in confidence. Charlie told her the stuff about the lawsuit and all of that in privacy. And she wrote it in the book.
After the fact, she wasn't, because they were in a whole other state when all this was going on. So you were really kind of just like an outsider. And she was just cluing you into certain things.
And it was in private, in confidence. She was not like gossiping about her life. She was like, oh my God, this is happening. And the girl crying, and she came and cried on her shoulder, and then you use it to put in the book. All that is foul, just foul.
And it'll never be the same.
It'll never be the same, no matter what they do. I don't care. If you're willing to do that, you got to think about that with your story. It's not your truth. It's not your experience. And no matter how nasty the house may be, is it for you to be the one to expose it to everybody? You got to think about that. Okay, so she talked about maybe this is not what you need to be doing, writing the memoir, period. There's tons of ideas in the space. Maybe this isn't the one you need to write. So in Jerry B. Jenkins' memoir, 4 Steps to Writing a Memoir, the 4th one is tell your story without throwing people under the bus. And this is his recommendation. If you're brave enough to expose your own weaknesses, foibles, embarrassments, and yes, failures to the world, what about those of your friends, enemies, loved ones, teachers, bosses, and co-workers? That you tell the truth. Are you allowed to throw them under the bus? In some cases, yes. No. Even if they gave you permission in writing, what's the upside? Usually a person painted in a negative light, even if the story is true, would not sign a release allowing you to expose them publicly. But even if they did, would it be right, ethical, kind thing to do? All I can tell you is that I wouldn't do it, and I wouldn't want it done to me. If the golden rule alone isn't reason enough not to do it, the risk of being sued certainly ought to be. So what to do? What to do? So she said don't do it. He's saying don't do it. But Nova still did it. So how do you do it? On the one hand, I'm telling you your memoir is worthless without the grit. And on the other hand, I'm telling you not to expose the evildoers. Stalemate. No, here's the solution. Changing names to protect the guilty is not enough. It's not enough. Too many people in your family and social orbit will know the person. Think of Darla when she went to work and everybody at work.
Oh my gosh.
All them folks, she only worked there about a minute, but yet all of those people knew.
Was just trying to be right.
Yes, that was Darla in that memoir. And social orbit will know the person making your writing legally actionable. So change more than the name. Change the location, change the year, change their gender. You can even change the offense. If your own father verbally abused you so painfully when you were 13 that you still suffer from the memory decades later, attribute it to a teacher and have it happen at an entirely different age. It still has the same powerful experience impact, and it still leads to your theme. Is that a line in a nonfiction book? Not if you include a disclaimer up front that stipulates some names and details have been changed to protect identities. So no, don't throw anyone under the bus, but don't stop that bus if you want to continue to write the memoir. All right, so that is some clues on how to do it. She could have changed full scope of the stories. She could have pulled out some things. We personally believe she shouldn't have did it. Period. Just don't write other people's stories. You got enough drama going on in your life. Sweep around your own front door. Write and tell all that, because she has enough.
And the thing about it was she kept on saying, because there was a small excerpt of what, you know, her contribute or whatever to the
contribution to the book, right?
Was there, but it was nothing in the scope of what everybody else had out there.
You had a man,
nothing,
and the man was with another woman who ain't heard that story 5 million times,
right? And it was minor compared to Charlie paying this woman off. It was minor compared to what happened to Darla. It was minor compared to the fact that Ralph Angel isn't really Blue's father.
Yes, and when you think about that story, that whole piece about her with the other man, one of the things that I think is so funny is she wrote all of those other stories in this very visceral, painful light. And she romanticized the story about her and the man, because later on they're talking about how he discovers that he was the love of her life, and he comes back in because he wants this relationship. All of that. So all of that is with rose-colored glasses on, while you see in crystal clear these other folks' dramas.
Exactly.
Terrible, terrible. So that's what we think about the whole Nova Bordelon train wreck of a memoir, and we hope you got some great stuff out of it. I'm going to do this little piece with Maya so we can learn a little bit more about her, and I said I was going to do this with any more guests that I plan to have. I would love to have more guests on my show too. So give us your favorite season.
I love summer. I like it when it's hot. I'm not really a winter girl. And because we live in Michigan, the spring and fall is very fickle. It can easily turn into a second winter. So summer all day.
All right, summer all day. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Tea, I'm a tea drinker too.
I cannot drink coffee because I'm already like naturally very energized.
Can't you tell we always on tea and around here? Cake or pie?
Cake. Not that I don't like pie, but I really enjoy cake.
Yes. Holding hands or rubbing feet?
Holding hands.
Aww.
Yeah.
Favorite social media platform?
Instagram.
Instagram.
Just because for me it has both, the best of both. So I get like a story, and then I get their time feed, and then like their explore pages is better.
All right. Celebrity or athlete crush?
I love Michael B. Jordan. That is my guy.
Creed. I've seen that about a million times.
Yes. And I just love like the Rocky series in general. So once he was the front man, I was like, oh, it's over.
Yes, that's good. One adjective to describe you?
Positive.
Ah, very nice. And one verb, and I used to tell my students all the time, verb is what you do. So one verb to describe you.
moving forward.
Ah, we like that. Moving forward. All right. Thank you so much for being on my show. We love this. Hopefully we can have more talks. And please make sure you like, subscribe, comment below. Tell us what you think about Nova's train wreck of a memoir. Maybe you're totally for it and you believe it was her truth to tell. So definitely comment before, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.